Hey folks, it's episode 91 of the Noclip podcast, and Danny here with another solo intro and another developer interview. This week ended up being a bit of a crazy, kind of weird, wild one. I was away in Los Angeles filming at Heart Machine for our Hyperlight development. You think I'd remember the name of the series by now? Hyperlight Development. Episode 2 of that show. It's going to be a really crazy episode, actually. Some pretty wild stuff happened down there, and showing an aspect of games development that we have never really shown, and I don't think many people have ever kind of seen what we captured down there. It's going to be pretty interesting. But as a result, everything's kind of got knocked around. We have a bunch of filming going on. We have a bunch of moving into the studio, all that sort of stuff. We had some big meetings this week, so we didn't have time to do a proper scrum. But it just so happened that I had already recorded a bonus podcast last week. I sat down with Julien, Roby, and Raphaël Colantonio of WolfEye Studios. Those are the folks behind Weird West, which, of course, if you listen to this podcast, you're well aware is one of my favorite games of 2022. We have an episode of Developer Breakdown over on the Crew channel, sort of diving into some of the technical and design, challenges that the team had to kind of get over during development and also post development. And this was a really good opportunity of talking about the entire project whole cloth since its launch. The game has been out for 6 months. They're putting out this pretty big. I don't know, it's not a demo. It's way too big to be a demo. It's kind of more like the old shareware model. They're basically allowing anyone to play the Bounty Hunter journey, which is the first of a number of journeys that you go on in Weird West. It's like the first, I don't know, in my head it's like hours of gameplay. It's the start of the game. So it's a pretty big chunk of the game. The game is also, I think, 50% off on Steam at the moment as well. So basically, I'm not saying this to promote it. I'm saying this to be like, this is a game that clearly they are trying to get more eyes on. And as part of that, they were more than happy to jump on the podcast and be pretty honest about how the game's done, how production was, how Gamepass worked, what sort of challenges they had on the technical side, on the marketing side. Raphael's always been pretty transparent about that sort of stuff, and himself and Julien and myself had a great chinwag about all of that. So that's coming up right now. First of all, before we do that though, a massive thanks to all of our Battle Pass holders: Cody Krieger, Forrest Pruitt, Andy Fagan, Cameron Ladd, George Sakotis, Jacob Godserve, and Tohir Tilyav. Thank you all so much. And thank you all for listening to this podcast. We'll be back next week with another sort of scrum between the crew, chat about all the games we've been playing in the interim. But for now, please enjoy this chat with Julien, Roby, and Raphaël Colantonio, all about Weird West. All right, I'm delighted to be joined by Raphaël Colantonio, who is no stranger to Noclip content at this stage, and Julien Roby, who worked with Raph and on a bunch of games that we've covered in the past on Noclip, but we've never had the opportunity to talk. Julien, first of all, thank you so much for making the time at, I believe it's midnight in Australia at the moment. Yeah. What is it? Winter there? Is it summer? Where are we in Australia?
The summer is starting.
Excellent. Perfect. So you'll be in the right hemisphere for the World Cup. It's perfect. Raphaël, yourself, how are you doing? 6 months of work post-release on Weird West. You still have all your hair it's not grey. You're looking good. How's it been the past 6 months?
It's a wig. It's been good. It's been we've mostly been patching the game over and over as much as we could. Game dev is hard. It's what it is. So it's like it takes a lot of testing and a lot of feedback from people. So glad we had the time and the resource to do that. So that now the game is pretty patched.
Excellent. Yeah, we're going to talk about a bunch today. Obviously, this week you're releasing the first journey available to basically everyone. They don't have to buy the game; they can play the whole first journey of the game, which is a sizable chunk. And it's 50% off as the time of this podcast going up on all the various platforms as well. So it's obviously a really big beat for you guys. But I want to talk about not just this week and what's happening in this latest thing, but also the past 6 months for you guys. And also, just because we've talked about it with relation to you being in Australia, Julien, I guess, Raph, what's it like, even post-release working with this distributed model? Because all of the team who work on Weird West are, fairly spread out, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, we had our first WolfCon since the pandemic.
Right.
So we met. Well, we call it the WolfCon. Well, Julien actually called it the WolfCon, which I thought was hilarious.
We have a logo and everything.
Yeah. So that was great. That was great because we were about 20 people in LA, split between two huge houses, and we had a blast. And frankly, it was great. It was great to some of the people we'd never met in person. So yeah, it felt amazing, and a lot of meetings, a lot of fun too. Just fun, just plain fun.
Has that changed? One of the things we've come across when talking to studios is that it's definitely changed, like hiring practices, like things that seem to be really important or limiting in the past aren't anymore. Have you experienced that yourselves?
It was never that limiting for us because we were already distributed before, and even when we were part of Arcane back in the day, there was kind of like, we were working with people that were out of state or out of country.
I would say, yeah, maybe the big difference is not being able to actually see them like physically at any point. Like as Raph was saying, like we hired some people midway through Weird West, and we had never actually met them in person.
Right.
So that makes it a bit awkward sometimes in terms of communication.
Yeah, I bet in the creative soup as well. Speaking of which, what's Raphaël like to work with? Because you've obviously, know him long enough, having worked on like Arcs and Dishonored and all these games where you can just give the sort of honest, no bullshit response. So
this was my last game with him. I can't do it anymore. No, I'm kidding. There's a reason why we got back together with WolfEye to work again together. Like we have a good synergy, I guess. So
it gets the job
I
done.
Like it. Yep.
It's a lot of game directors and Harvey or whatever. It's hard to find the right dose between being a dictator and too easygoing, etc. So that's kind of my challenge all the time. It's like to try to find how to be collaborative, without being into some sort of like a weird committee thing where like decisions get never made, and because people can be all over the place, and it's hard to find the right. And over the years, I think I've mellowed down a lot. Like, had you worked with me 20 years ago, I was probably more of a hard ass. And I would say the same about Harvey. I mean, people would probably say the same. We were both like kind of intense and hard and like determined into what we want, and there's no other way. A lot of people like that because they can just like, okay, we're just following the thing. And some people don't. Some people want like more flexibility. And I think what happened when Harvey and I worked together on Dishonored for the first time, we both had to be way more flexible, because like now there were two of us, right. and every decisions could not be made on the fly. Yeah, let's do this, because then the other one would look like, what? No. So we had to both chill a little bit, and I think it was a good thing. I think we learned how to be to put a little buffer between the immediate decision and the final decision. And again, maybe we've lost a little bit. We lost a little bit in that approach, but I think we gained as well in that approach.
Well, a lot of decisions to be made post-launch. This is an interesting thing for us to talk about because we often don't get to talk about this moment, the sort of the scramble after a game comes out, especially in 2022 when this seems to be so important, and releasing a game isn't the final part of the journey as maybe it would have been 20 years ago, maybe even similar to that, maybe in the more recent history. So I guess the first question I'll ask you guys is, like, how was launch? Like, was it below expectations, above expectations? Did you do better on some platforms than others? What were the sort of, I guess, the first challenges that you were addressing as well once the game came out?
Who starts?
Go for it.
All right. Well, since we're the no bullshit people, I'll tell you, it was below expectations. And it's always hard to know why, right? We have identified like 4 or 5 reasons that seem believable, but it is, you could theorize for like hours, and you will always have a doubt, like why, and some is Elden Ring, frankly. Came out at the same time. Some is Gamepass. It's hard to know. So the thing is, like, as far as like numbers of players, we've hit pretty hard. But most of our sales, or let's say our players, were on Gamepass.
Right.
It was pretty nice numbers. But because Gamepass is a fee, it's a flat fee. It's not like per player. Then you end up with we haven't fully recouped yet. It's kind of where we are. But I think it's over time it's going pretty well. So we're not worried so much about the future or the viability of the IP and the interest in players in the game. But it's been weird, and frankly, talking to a lot of other developers' friends, 2022 has been weird.
Right.
New transition to new business models. Coming out of the pandemic, I mean, there's been a lot of things where, like, we're a little bit, people are a little off balance in the industry, and we don't quite know what's happening. Fortunately enough, we're a very small group. We made this game with 20 people.
Right.
So that's fine. But Julien, add something?
Yeah, in terms of the reception, I guess also from the players, it was interesting to see, like, throughout development, you have to make choice in terms of what are your priorities and decide that, hey, yeah, this thing is not perfect, but we can't have everything perfect in the game, so we leave this one like as it is and then focus on something else. And then it might have been surprising that some things that we thought were not that important ended up being very important for players.
Yeah, what type of stuff was that? I guess we talked with Raphaël and our developer breakdown on Noclip Crew about things like, for instance, the console players with aiming, for instance, was one part of that, which obviously I didn't experience at all playing the PC version of the game myself. So that was one that you pretty much, I know you added in the alternative aiming system. At least, is it in proper? I remember originally it was like there was like an experimental build of that. Is that in its final form now?
So we still call it experimental, but it's in kind of final form. So we shipped it with the last patch a couple of weeks ago, and people have been reacting well to it. But it's one of those things where we did a closed beta test before the release of the game, and most people were happy with the twin stick shooter kind of aiming scheme. And then it was more like when the game released, we realized that a lot of the people actually, there's like a part of the population that really likes playing with this scheme of controls, and the other part which actually doesn't like it at all.
Right.
So that caught us a bit off guard, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like a tricky game to QA because there's just so much, like, it's a byproduct of the variability and dynamic nature of the game itself, right? It's like your QA pool can never be big enough.
Yeah, we start to like early access more.
Right.
Because of that, it's an interesting. I think for a while devs would look at early access like a way to sell this stuff earlier and therefore finance, fund the game before you really have the money, kind of thing. But I think the true power of early access is more like how to build a community and how people are going to help you making a better game from as you go, way before it's too late, kind of thing.
Right. Would it be something you'd consider on a follow-up project?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely. definitely.
You mentioned Game Pass as well. Obviously, you can't get into the numbers and the deals and all that sort of stuff, and I fully appreciate that. But when you sign up to something like that, what are some of the advantages that you're thinking of? Is it like having that critical mass of players talking about the game? Is it a way to offset, to at least get like some of your upfront development costs back? What are you thinking at? Because I know Microsoft generally tends to sign games on Game Pass closer to release. They don't tend to like fund games early in development for Game Pass.
No, yeah, they went on board very, very early, which at that time we didn't fully know if it would be a good thing or not. It was kind of a gamble, and the given is that it puts a lot of eyes on your game. Julien, go on.
Yeah, I was about to say, since we can't really, unfortunately, we can't test a reality where we don't have been on Game Pass, it's difficult to know what was the actual impact. But I think that the initial idea was to say that, hey, there's probably overlap, but it's not going to cannibalize the other sales, for instance. So the idea was more to see it as a tool to get some exposure for the game, have a lot of people talking about the game and seeing the game, and use it more like some sort of marketing tool almost than anything.
I think the Game Pass thing is unavoidable. Like it's PlayStation is going to do their own, and the world is doing this for anything. Like now you're going to have a Eat Pass with McDonald's. I mean, that depends.
Is that a real thing, or are you making that up? Because I can't tell.
It up,
but I can't tell.
Give them 6 months, it will be exactly. Real. It's going to happen, right? I mean, Starbucks does that. No, for real. Starbucks has a plan where you can have as many coffee as you want for a flat fee. So I think we're in that buffet phase of the world and the economy, which is I think disastrous personally for as far as the impact on human people.
Right.
Buffet is not good. It can be good. It's bad for you. So, but the point is, we can go against that. We gotta adapt and see what it means for us, all developers and gamers. Where now we're entering this phase of the world where play a fat fee and you can have as much thing as you want forever. And so how does it work for people who make games?
Right.
It might mean that both systems will still coexist, but maybe that you buy the game is suddenly a smaller market, so you have to budget accordingly, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's where we are, and there's so much momentum, and making games take 3 or 4 years. So by the time between the moment you aim and you shoot and the moment the bullet lands on the target, the chances of the target is not there anymore.
Right. Yeah.
I think the danger for a developer our size, I guess, is that if the fee you're being paid for being on a subscription service is not big enough to emulate big sales, then suddenly you probably are starting to get skewed into changing your design so that you monetize some part of the game so that people who get the game for free still give you some revenue, and then you enter some weird stuff where you design the game around revenue rather than trying to design a great game.
Yeah. And that's probably more elegant for some games than others. I remember back to when we did our first ever documentary on Rocket League, and they were saying similar things to you, where they were like, "Oh, we think we just gave away our game to our biggest audience," but they had a game that was fairly, I guess, not easy, but it was a more elegant way of selling in-game purchases than, say, cowboy hats in Weird West, or I guess horse armor. You could do horse armor.
Yeah.
I think that was a one-time historical thing. It'll take another 666 years before it happens again.
Right. Well, they did put it in Monkey Island, but it was mostly a joke in the new Monkey Island. If you pre-ordered on Switch, you got horse armor as well. So, I guess, it works for certain cases. So let's talk about the demo, because this is kind of, in a way, like Game Pass, a way of getting the game out in front of a lot of people, but critically, it's also a way to get more eyes on the game and also maybe entice some people to play it. I called it a demo, but this actually it's almost like shareware, like Doom or something, where you're just giving away the game, the first chapter of the game, which is a lot of game. But are people going to be able to port over their save? How is the whole thing going to work?
Yeah, so essentially the way it works is that you can download for free the Bounty Hunter Journey on Steam, and once you've done that, you can, if at any point you feel like you want to unlock the rest of the game so that you can continue playing, you can do that from within the game or just by buying the game in Steam, and by doing that, your save carries over seamlessly from one to the other, so you can continue playing without having to restart everything. But yeah, our goal with that was to say that it's been 6 months since the game released. We did a lot of iteration on it, reacting to community feedback and everything, and we felt like it was a good time for people who may not have been convinced by the game yet to come back and have an opportunity to check it out in depth.
Obviously, this is a big investment in terms of time and effort on the team side. What learnings or what knowledge did you have about players or about demos? For instance, I know Steam, often games are highly wishlisted that end up on one of Steam's, demo festivals or whatever. But what did you guys sort of read in the tea leaves about how players are interacting with demos or interacting with these, bigger chunks of games that led you to go down this path? Because it is a pretty big investment in your team's time.
Yeah, to be honest, personally, I haven't worked on a game that has a demo in many years, so it's going to be interesting to see. But I think our goal was really just to give the players the opportunity to actually try the game and see for themselves what it is about, because it's a game that's been also difficult, I think, to communicate about and market to people, in the sense that it's kind of a complicated game with many different parts, and there's not many games that are like it on the market. So it's also an opportunity for people to be able to actually check it out before deciding if they want to buy it or not.
Is it frustrating working on games that tend to have, it's funny, right? We did the documentary on Prey a couple of years ago, and you talk to people when Prey came out, and you had this huge chunk of folks who were like, you got to play this game. And then a lot of other people going like, I didn't come into the game. And now you talk about it with people, and it seems like much more people have played it, and they're all still, they're all talking positively about it. Is it something about Immersive Sims that it just, sometimes they need to sit in the wine cellar longer and then people come to appreciate them, or?
I think so. It's, I was going to say arcane games have been always like that, but I think it's more than that. I think you're right. It's like the Immersive Sim type, in a way, I think, do you remember Vampire Bloodline?
Yes.
Same kind of thing.
It came out the same day as Half-Life 2.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, that's a mistake already. But
talk about Elden Ring,
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and those are things you can't always control. But yeah, nobody really talked about the game back then, and now it's it's the cult game, right? And so,
totally, yeah.
And with some of the games Julien and I have been working on, we went through the same stuff, and Prey is definitely one of those, and so yeah, because fundamentally I think those games are full of they have some values, they have some passion, they have something that resonate with people, right? At least with a part of the people, and when they come out, if they're not in the right context or whatever, it's kind of the story of my life, frankly. Then people miss out on them, and then they come back later, 2 or 3 years later. Oh my God, this is actually super cool. Why did we not hear about this when it came out? It's I don't know why.
Right.
Those games are hard to market. They're really, really hard to market because it's like you're trying to sell a Swiss Army knife. It's marketing wise, I think it's easy to latch on to one specific thing, but when you're selling something. But when it's a little bit of everything, like the Immersive Sims are often, it's harder to sell. I think Dishonored was a supernatural assassin, right? That was really the pitch. It was a badass supernatural assassin, period.
Right.
And that is easier to sell than even Prey, where yeah, you go to the space station, you're a scientist, and things went wrong. It's pretty short and punchy, you'd think, but it doesn't sell as much as being a badass supernatural assassin. At least it's not as broad from the target audience. Not everybody wants to be a scientist.
Right. Yeah.
Some people like to be an assassin, though. So yeah, those games have a slow start usually.
How would you? Was there anything about the way in which Weird West was marketed? Just because you brought it up, was there anything about that you would have changed, or was it a lot of that on the publisher side, or was that on your side, or?
I don't know. I think it's a bit of both. It's just a hard exercise. And who says that it was not done right? I don't know. It's one of those where it's well, maybe that's it, maybe that's that. I just frankly don't know. I think I would not want to be a marketer for this game. It's any of my games. They was hard to market. They were really hard. I don't know. Maybe we should have been clearer on the action RPG side. It's really an action RPG, so that you don't have. That's not that complicated. You don't have to think of it like as an immersive. And immersive sim is scary, I think. Like those two words are blurry. People don't really know what they are. Maybe being part of the lineup of Devolver was also like something that people did not immediately map to what they imagine of a Devolver game. Devolver games are usually smaller, artsy, super violent, funny games. Which is not necessarily the case of this one. So maybe when they saw the trailers where you see people shooting, etc., oh yeah, it's another Hotline Miami clone or clone.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I frankly don't know. Again, I think it's when something doesn't exactly go the way you want, you can have as many theories as there are people in the room.
Yeah.
So exactly.
It's because I feel like I have zero to add or zero, I guess, insight into that either, because I come labored with the knowledge of your development team's experience and the types of games you kind of make. So I kind of knew about that stuff beforehand, and I think a lot of people who played it originally also perhaps had that as well, and they were excited for WolfEye's first game rather than excited for what Weird West was before they even knew what Weird West was, probably. So it's hard. It's impossible to like put yourself in the shoes of some 25-year-old person who maybe has never played any of those games before and sees the trailer or a screenshot for 2 seconds and makes their mind up like that. Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, and that's related to what you just said. That's why Julien and I practically worked on all the same game from the get-go, other than Prey, I believe. That was the only game we don't have in common. And all our games, people eventually find them and buy them. It just takes time. So, by Arcs is still selling.
Right. Are you still getting checks?
Not me anymore. But
every time somebody kicks an orc, you get €1.
Yeah, you wish, but no. That's the reality. When I was still part of Arcane, I would see every year like the Steam results, and we're like, wow, we made money. I mean, it's a substantial amount of money, something, And 20 years later, 23 years later, whatever it is now. No, it's 20 actually, yeah. And so, yeah, it's pretty crazy. So we know over time, the game is going to find its because it's an honest game. It's an honest, fun game with everything that it needs to be for this kind of genre. So we'll find the people.
Excellent, cool, yeah. So I guess, like even post-release, these games just have longer tails, and this is obviously a fairly big beat for your crew, getting this first chapter out there. I guess, in a way, when I think back to playing that first journey, it did almost feel kind of like a demo in that it set up. It sort of does encapsulate what there's 5 journeys in total, right? If I remember correctly. It sort of sets up the flow of like, oh, this is what's going to happen. This is the character that you'll have for a journey. It's going to change, but here you've basically like understood all of the systems to that point.
Yeah, it's like the gateway to the rest of the game.
Yeah, and even the chapter at the end of it kind of sets that up a little bit, doesn't it? Kind of, because that's when it reveals that, oh, you're going to be doing this a couple of times. Was it difficult from a technical perspective, Julien, to sort of remove to extract that chapter from the rest of the game, or was because
no? It was a lot easier than we thought. It kind of worked on its own. So we were happy with that. The biggest part was like we were wondering, once you finish the first journey and you have this journey complete screen, we want you to let you have the debrief. And then if you don't have the rest of the game, you need to go back to the main menu. But then we were like, hold on, what's going to be the last save point from that? So that the guy can then buy the game and continue the game. And luckily enough, it kind of worked on its own with the autosave. So we're like, okay, well, don't touch anything, it's working.
Nice one.
One of the challenges is that you can go anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a pretty big demo or big download.
We give a lot.
It's actually the build. The thing that's good as well is that the way we did it, once you have downloaded the build for playing the Bounty Hunter journey, it's exactly the same build as the game. So you don't have to re-download things, and it's just like unlocks parts of the game or not, depending on what you own on Steam, essentially.
And as you said, this journey, what are you guys calling it? I keep calling it a demo. It doesn't feel appropriate. What is it?
The Bounty Hunter journey.
Bounty Hunter journey. Got it. So, this obviously comes with the 6 months of stuff that you've added. We talked about the aiming system. The other thing I want to talk about is Nimpossible mode. So this is the, I found this really interesting because obviously I'm wondering, was this something that you guys wanted to do, or was this requested from the community. For people who don't know, Nimpossible mode is basically a sort of a permadeath style mode where, if I'm remembering correctly, you can't do any saves manually. There is an autosave system that only saves one save, and then if you die, you need to have one of the Nimp heads to resurrect your character. If you don't have one, Dunzo spits you back to the main menu. Yeah, was this something that you guys always thought you'd put in, or was this something that emerged from the community reaction to the game?
Well, it was part of the legacy of the original concept. The game was meant to be played this way. We and then we thought, well, it's going to be too hard. It's going to be way too hard. But the idea was there, the concept was there. Some people in the house really liked it, and we thought, well, maybe we release a mode at least inspired by this later. And so this is not exactly the way the game was meant to be played at the very beginning, because the concept has changed so much anyway. But it's a legacy of that.
What's funny as a legacy is that the Nimp head item, that you have in the base game, the only reason why it existed in the game was because, at the very beginning of production, we had this item to resurrect, and then we decided to just leave it in the game for a lore reason. And then people were like, "Oh, what is this item for? It's weird. It seems special, but it doesn't do anything."
Right? Yeah. Am I remembering correctly that at least you could sell it for a lot?
Yeah, we ended up putting it as something that you can resell.
Yeah, so I was pretty excited, I think, when I got one, so I could make a bunch of dosh. Yeah, that's funny. So I guess that goes back to the old roguelike sort of concept that we talked about on our developer breakdown. That's awesome. Was that difficult to implement as well? Was that something that sort of fit back into the system, or was it? Did you have to do some balancing, or hey, we need to put more Nimp heads in this part of the game?
Yeah, it was interesting because since we use exactly the same content for both modes, in one mode the Nimp heads give you money and the other one gives you resurrect, so you might not want to tune it exactly the same way. But we feel like it kind of worked out in the end. The other part was also we had a specific spot in the game, without spoiling, where if you don't do something quick enough, you actually die, and you are blocked under the mine. If you know what point I'm talking about. And so with the concept of resurrect, we're like, well, hold on, if you resurrect while you're actually blocked in the mine, what happens? So it was a bit a few tricky situation like this.
Excellent. Was there any stuff you hadn't thought about that then once it went live, you were like, uh-oh, we need to change that one, or were you covered pretty well?
No, I think we're at least up to this point. We'll see next week once we have more people on the game. But
excellent. So yeah, I mean, the Bounty Hunter Journey is out right now. The shareware, pick it up, get it copied from your local university server right now. Pick out the shareware for Weird West. You're also doing a sale at the moment, is that right? Fairly aggressive one.
Yeah. The game is currently 50% off on Steam, Epic Game Store, and GOG.
Excellent. Okay, so it should be a pretty interesting week for you guys next week when this all kicks off. At time of recording, this is all happening right now. You can go pick up the Bounty Hunter Journey on Steam, or is the Journey just on Steam? Is it on consoles?
So the free Journey is only on Steam.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's probably something that's trickier to put out on consoles. There's kind of no mechanism for much of that. Excellent. Thank you both for coming on and chatting to us. Always a pleasure. I guess, I'm excited for the rest of this game to keep working on this. Are you guys planning on any content for Weird West in the future? Are you looking ahead to the next project after this? A bit of an awkward time to ask the question, but I just have to know.
We do have some more Weird West stuff coming out. I mean, I don't know how much we can say, Julien, but as far we're done, yeah. So we're still supporting it, but we're also at this stage we're transitioning and thinking of what's next.
Excellent. Julien, Roby, Raphaël, Colantonio, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with the journey and the sale.
Thank you, Danny.